Hello, friends. Welcome to 60 minutes of unscripted .NET entertainment. This is the On .NET live show. Our mission is to empower the .NET community to achieve more. I'm your host, Myra Wenzel, and I'm joined by my co-host, David Pine.
Hello.
And then I have some special guests here with me today, so John Miller and Pierce Boggan. How about you introduce yourself, guys?
Sure.
Hey, you want to go ahead, John?
I
Classic
don't
talking
know.
over each other in front of the
I'm
intros. Good
just waiting
start.
for you to start so
It's
we have to
Mondays.
talk over
We
you.
always have a case of Mondays.
Go ahead, John.
Sure, I can go first. So I'm John Miller. I'm a PM, and I'm working on some developer tools for Teams, which I'm going to share with you today.
And I'm Pierce, and I also work with John on developer tools for building Teams apps.
Yeah, and so today we have a special show because we're going to be showing people how to build Teams, a Teams bot app with .NET. And so I'm very excited about that. But first, let's head to our related bits with David. David, do we have you? You're muted.
I'm muted. You called it. Case of the Mondays. So awesome. I'm super excited for you guys to be here. So in this related bits section, we've got the Teams Toolkit overview doc. And if Myra, you could share the little link on the bottom.
Yeah, let's see.
So this is a doc I have not come prepared with. I was looking at the other one. I thought it was the one that was the tutorial. So, but anyways, at a high level, the Teams toolkit is an integration with Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code. And you can use these two IDEs to build actual applications that you can then interact with from Teams. And it's actually really cool. So in preparation for this, I built a Teams bot that will just, kind of regurgitate jokes. It's not super exciting, but I was thinking, there's a lot of different things that you can do this with this. So there's like notifications, there's command bots. That's the one the template I was following. And there's these other types that I'm not familiar with. But with the command bot, I did have some ideas, and I'd love to see other, developer community folks kind of chime in and contribute, apps and build things. And one of the things I was thinking about was like perhaps like a dictionary, right? You could say like define and put in a word, and then it would just give you a definition and perhaps like synonyms and other alternatives. And, there's all these different things that you can do with this integration. And if you're living in Teams and working there and, chatting and interacting with others, it's very extensible. So
Like maybe a company's like acronyms dictionary.
oh my gosh, that's such a good idea. Yes. So Microsoft is really, really good at just creating acronyms, right? So that would be, gosh, that's a really good idea, Myra. We should totally do that. We should do that. Yeah, that's pretty much it for related bits. This is kind of high level overview kind of about the toolkit. And I'm certain that Pierce and John are going to go much deeper and kind of show us a lot more. So let's jump right into the hallway track. So, Pierce and John, I see that you guys are well enough alone such that you've contributed to sharing your screen here. Should we jump right into sharing your screen and go from there? Or do you guys want to talk more high level? Like, what is Teams? What we've got so many viewers from around the world, right? We're live on Visual Studio Twitch right now and live on .NET on YouTube. So maybe there's people that aren't familiar with Teams. What's Teams? Let's start there.
Oh, that's a good question. Teams. What is Teams? When I think of the best way for me to answer that is really, I think of it first as like a chat application. So it's a way for me to talk with my colleagues, way for me to make calls. It's really just a communication tool. But we'll dive a little bit more into how it can become more than that. But you get a lot of integrations with your organization. Like you can see files in there, you can share files in there, you can open them directly in there, you can edit things in there, you can add comments to files. What else is there to do, Pierce? Maybe I'm probably missing a lot, but that's the stuff I use on a regular basis.
Yeah, and the thing I really like is because of the Teams concept, like you can get all these people who are working on similar things together. I know like at our job, we have like these virtual teams or V teams where we're getting, a group of people together from all these different teams. Let's work together on something to, maybe we want to make some end-to-end flow better across Visual Studio and Azure. Okay, well, that's people from all over, Microsoft to make that happen. And so I think normally you might be like, oh, well, I'm just in a team and it just has people from my team. But one of the really cool things about Teams is this Teams concept where basically you can create a team with anyone from your organization, and you can even invite people externally now, and you can collaborate together on stuff. And like John said, with that team, you get a file system that you can share files together on. It's all the normal OneDrive fun stuff. So that's something that our team uses heavily. And like John said, of course, you have regular chat, you have meetings, you have all this fun stuff. You have apps, which we'll talk about more. But it's basically, as a PM, maybe where I spend like 90% of my day, and the other 10% is in Outlook probably. So between those two apps, that's like where I'm spending most of my day, I'd say.
Awesome.
But
Awesome.
I don't know for you, but for me, it kind of shifted. Like I was very email driven, but on the last few years, like You can find me on Teams at any point. Like about email, I don't guarantee.
Hashtag you can find me on Teams. That's awesome.
Just don't message me hello and then never respond again.
Yeah, exactly.
Please.
No hello.
My anxiety just goes through the roof when I see hello and then nothing else. I'm like, oh no, what's gonna happen?
Oh, that's awesome. So let's bring this full circle then. How does this relate to .NET? Right. So this is the .NET show. You know, our viewers are .NET enthusiasts and evangelists, and they love the stuff, or some of them might be just getting started with it. So how does this, you know, Teams application and this entire ecosystem within an organization, how does this tie back to .NET?
Yeah, I think that, you know, the best way we can maybe jump into my screen. I'll just have a couple slides just to hit some bullet points on, maybe lay the foundation for how this ties together, and really start talking about like Teams apps. That's kind of the terminology we've been talking about, but I think it's helpful, you know, think about what even does that mean, because app is, even internally within our team, we talk about this all the time. Like, what is an app? It can mean a lot of different things. And my background in mobile development, an app means a very different thing than what maybe we'll show today. So a Teams app, I kind of put these 4 points. This is how I think about it. It's really a way for you to bring key information and common tools and trusted processes directly to where people in your business are already working together and they're learning together, that kind of thing. So that's kind of the communication, the collaboration, maybe the social piece of it. You can also connect with your customers. So Pierce mentioned you can bring external people into Teams to, you know, connect both your business with other businesses. You can share information. It's a way for you to automate repetitive tasks. Maybe you want to reserve a common resource like a meeting room or something. There's also maybe you want to file a ticket with HR or some type of IT help desk type situation. And then there's also ways that you can extend the way that Teams already works. There's apps in Teams. So things that Teams does that are kind of encapsulated as an app, you can extend those. And, you know, it's also a way for you to take your existing business processes. So maybe you have a business tool you use that's a web-based tool. You can bring that into Teams and extend it that way. And so it might help you grow your user base that way. So it's a way for you to surface your existing web app where people are already at and communicating and working together. So that's kind of how I think about, you know, why would you do a Teams app? So then let me go one slide here, talk a little bit about what is a Teams app. So again, 4 points here of how I think about what a Teams app is. It's how you extend the Teams platform. And it can be personal, so it could be just for you, or you can share it in a team, in a chat with your colleagues, in a group, kind of the different like places that you interact inside of Teams. Apps are web-based, so if you're going to do UI, it's usually web-based technologies that create the UI. If you're going to create something like a bot, then we have some type of hosted solution, usually web-based technology, that Teams will interact with to provide that experience. And then another way to think about it is it's a hosted endpoint. So at the root of it, there's a manifest that we call it. It's a JSON file. It just kind of defines what your app is, what shape it's taking. Is it a bot? Is it a UI in some way? And where is it? So that way Teams knows, how do I communicate with this thing, or where do I display this from? And then, you know, just kind of, you know, there's a way you can learn that in a schema and everything, but we don't need to get into that right now. And then we keep talking about the Teams platform. So this is kind of a look at the Teams platform and what those capabilities are. So that's another term here. And at the top, we see things like adaptive cards and tabs and bots, message extension, task module. These are kind of the areas of Teams that you interact with if you use Teams on a regular basis. And you may not realize that these are also extendable surfaces. So these are places you can put customized experiences. So in a tab, in a channel or a chat, you can embed your own UI there with a web-based technology, or a bot. You want to do some type of conversational workflow, which I'll show you today, just a simple way to create a bot. So it's a way to interact with the chat, extend the way, you know, send messages, message extensions. So something I do on a regular basis, and Pierce probably gets sick of it, is I send a lot of animated GIFs in our Teams chats. So, you know, there's a button at the bottom of the compose toolbar, and you can click that and search for a GIF. Okay, good. Don't worry. Good. Hey, that's how I express myself. So we have a lot of fun with that. So that, that type of experience is a message extension, where you pop up a little display like this, and then, it shows previews of the GIFs. You can search, and then you can click. There's lots of other things like for Azure DevOps, there's integration. So you can search for a work item and send in like a rich display of that work item, which is what an adaptive card shows. It's, a UI for you to kind of show a rich UI inside of chat. And then task modules. I think the best way to think of those right now is just like a modal dialogue, a way for you to show some type of UI dialogue. Maybe it's a form or something, some type of information you want to collect, and then do something else with it. Maybe send it to a bot or send it to a channel as an adaptive card.
That's really cool. I just wanted to chime in here real quick.
Sure.
Frank is saying that this is really nice. He's always wanted to build something like that. For example, like an on-air sign. And I think that, our other co-host, Cam Soper, he was looking at doing this, and he might actually have some bits that are integrated with this already. But how difficult would something like that be?
It's funny. I forgot I had done this until I saw this comment right now, but I've actually done this where I've gone as far as like, creating a physical on-air representation, which to me was a Wi-Fi enabled light bulb outside my office. And I tied it to my Stream Deck, which is this little tool I have on my desk that has a bunch of buttons on it. And I could turn it to say like, if I'm busy or, I'm on air or I'm not, and that would change my light bulb green to red. And then I could connect with, there's an API for changing your Teams presence. So I could change my Teams presence to be DND when I'm live, or, available or whatever I want. So it's actually not too hard to do that. And then you could go further than that if you wanted to. And, maybe you want to post something in a channel, or you want to do something else, some other part of the way you want to extend with the Teams platform, if you want to make an app for that. So yes, that's fully doable. And there's quite a bit of samples online already. And as far back as, doing this with Skype, and that's all, there's lots of stuff to learn there. So yeah, totally doable. I've done it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I just remembered that I had Cam and we both bought like Raspberry Pis and like this little 3.5-inch LCD screen that would have the Pi sitting behind it, and it was going to be like similar to like Presence Light. I think he's saying that right now. Yeah, it's one of those things where you buy a Raspberry Pi and then it just sits in your desk and you forget about it for a while, and like I need to go revisit that and do it.
Yeah, I have a couple sitting up here somewhere on this shelf, ready to be used. Cool.
Someone has an interesting idea too, to list all the Teams meeting they attended in duration. So like kind of knowing how much time you spend on meetings in a week.
Ooh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure I want to know that, but sounds good like that.
Oh gosh, that's funny.
All right, let's continue.
All right, so just some example. I took a screenshot here of the App Store. So in the Teams client, there's a little icon you can click. It says Apps. That brings up this menu. I thought it might be helpful just take a look at some of the apps that are available in Teams already. So these are just the top things that I clicked on as popular on Teams. So these aren't apps that I've built. These are apps that are published to the Teams store. So that's something else you can do. You can, if you have already have some type of service or offering that you build. Another angle is this, I'm mostly talking about line of business type applications today, but there's another end of it too, where you can actually publish to the store. So like I said, they can be personal. Personal could mean just for you, could mean just for your team, just for your business, or you can share them. And that could mean that it's, available to anyone using Teams to install as part of the Teams store. So these are things that are available in the store. Microsoft has many apps in here as well.
I've got a very naive question. Like, is any of this monetized at all? Or is like there a way to be like, I want a paywall. If you're going to use my cool app, it's so amazing. You're going to want to pay 99 cents a month for it or something.
So
there is.
There is.
Yeah, there is. And I would say that many of the apps so far haven't done that because either they're procured outside of the Teams client. So like as an example, our team uses Mural. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's basically like a virtual whiteboard. And we use that for like a lot of our brainstorming and things like that. So Microsoft already bought licenses for that. So we can just use the Mural app, sign in, boom, it works, right? We recently announced capabilities so that you can kind of do exactly what you just said, David. So you could pay on a subscription basis, one-time basis for an app. I think we're working towards having more flexibility in terms of how people acquire these apps. But today, I would say most of them are probably acquired via procurement purposes outside of Teams, and then people just log in and they work in Teams. So for most, if you're paying, if you like are surfing through the App Store and you see, hey, I'm using this app outside of Teams, for the most part, that should also work in Teams, right? Unless there's some weird licensing thing with that product, which is pretty cool because I think we were kind of just talking about earlier how much we were using Teams and living in Teams. And obviously our collaboration with each other is a big part of that. But like John and I use Power BI, right? So bringing in all of these other integrations, like I think that's going to be a central theme. Like when you think about what types of apps you can build for Teams, is like integrations. All these things that live outside of Teams, bringing them into the flow of your work. Like John was sharing that GIFs example, the Azure DevOps example. Like the more you can bring these integrations and things you're doing outside of Teams into the collaborative flow of teamwork, which is a very like hand wavy phrase, but what I mean by that is like, hey, we have a channel, and like I know on our team, for example, we have like something that when someone mentions our product on Twitter, like we post into the Teams channel. Like it doesn't have to be crazy, but like I really like that because it kind of shifts my action as a PM from having to do this proactive task of going to the browser, opening up twitter.com, searching for Teams Toolkit, versus like the bot, which is just like, hey, if something happens, I know it's going to land here. And then you throw in the channels concept. Well, what if I have survey feedback? Okay, well, that can go in the survey feedback channel, and you can start to use channels for these different concepts. So there's all these really cool things you can kind of layer on top of each other. Sorry, John, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
No, you answered it perfectly. And just to build on what you said, the cool thing I like about, for like you just mentioned that Twitter thing, the neat thing about I do like about that is now it's not all of us on our team going and doing that, right? That's
Right.
It's brought that into
Right.
Teams, and when we
Right.
all see that in our channel, then we can discuss it like right there. Like, oh, look, that user just said this, that, and the other thing. Let's make sure we have a bug on that. You know, we could go from there and use a message extension to create a work item. And we didn't really left Teams. So that makes it really convenient to make sure things get done pretty quickly. So the productivity boost there is nice. All right, so that was, I was just showing an example of Teams apps. Yeah, so I think the next thing was really for me to just jump in to show you Teams Toolkit and show you how you might build something like this.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so let me close that.
Just a friendly reminder to all of our live viewers, if you've got questions, feel free to type them here in chat and we'll make sure that we try to address them.
We will do our best. Okay, so I'm going to open up VS here, but before we get started, I just want to highlight something on how you get the tools that I'm going to be showing you. So in the VS installer, in the ASP.NET and web development workload, the Teams Toolkit is a part of this workload, but it's an optional checkbox right now. And you can see on the right-hand side here, I have this checkbox, Microsoft Teams Development Tools. So by default, that will be unchecked. So if you want to install it, you can just modify your VS installation and check that box. And I think it's maybe 10-ish megabytes. And then it will add the Teams Toolkit and Visual Studio extension to your installation. So I've already done that. So I'll go ahead and minimize that. That's why it's checked. And then
I'll just go ahead and add, John, like the reason that it's right there, like it's inside of ASP.NET, is because you're using ASP.NET Core. If you're a .NET developer, everything we're going to show is using .NET. It should feel super familiar. So that's why it belongs in that workload, because if you're already building .NET apps, especially .NET web apps, either visually or like APIs, this should all feel super familiar to you because it's literally using those exact concepts to build Teams apps.
Yeah, we got a question if it's this VS preview or if it's the latest version.
No, it's not on VS preview only. It's in stable as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, sorry, I just happened to. I'm so used to using VS preview. I have the latest preview 17.3 preview or 17.4 preview installed. But yes, it's available on both. So once you add the Teams Toolkit extension, like we just mentioned, then really the main thing you get from the beginning is you get this template called Microsoft Teams app. So it's kind of a way for you to start. When you do File New Project, you can choose Microsoft Teams app, and you get a couple options here. I'll just create those by default. So then we have this sort of wizard here to give you some options on how you want to start. And the concept behind Teams Toolkit is really to jumpstart you into the outcome that you want to build. So we have a couple opinions on that right now. And notification bot, command bot are probably the most common. That's why we've surfaced them. And this is really our look at talking to customers and seeing how they build Teams apps, seeing what the first kind of thing they want to do in their business for building a line of business apps is to bring some type of external information that they already have happening in their business into Teams. And so we consider that like you're notifying users. It's some type of message into Teams. So the notification bot template helps you scaffold that out with a lot of the boilerplate out of the way, so that way you can just work on the kind of the business logic. And then command bot is a similar concept, but kind of the other way around, where you want to issue some type of action inside of Teams and then trigger some, maybe a process you've already have established in a business, or you want to do some custom logic and return a result. So that's the command scenario. And the tab is a way for you to embed basically web UI inside of Teams. So if you have a UI-based web app that you want to put inside of Teams, the way to do that is to put that inside of a tab of a chat or a channel. And so the tab template helps you do that. And the cool thing about this is it uses Blazor Server. This template uses Blazor Server to create the UI. And then we kind of talked a little bit about message extensions already, but that helps you extend where you type in the compose area, so you can add something in there. But I'm going to show you today the notification bot. I think that's a pretty simple scenario, and it's pretty easy to create. We give you 4 options on how you want to handle what triggers that notification. So this is kind of a way for you to determine, what template do I want to start with? What technologies am I familiar with? So the way you can think about this is, do I want to trigger this notification, this message into Teams, via some type of HTTP call? So we have that here as an HTTP trigger. Or do I want this to run on a timer? So do I want like a daily notification, some kind of a roll up? And an idea of that is something we do on our team is we have a timer notification every day for Azure DevOps work items that are getting stale. So when things are getting stale, we have a customized message here to our team that pings each of us with all the work items, with the links, with the names, who's assigned, these kind of things. And the view of that is customized on how we want it to be. So that's why we have built our own app for it. And the query for that and everything is customized. It's really a way for us also to test the tools out. But we use that on the daily. So that's a timer. I think the trigger is probably the simplest, and we can either scaffold that with a ASP.NET Web API project or as an Azure function. So just a difference on how you want to host that and what technologies you prefer.
So really interesting here. Like as a PM, you guys mentioned, living kind of in Teams and then also in tandem Outlook. So with the timer stuff, I was thinking to myself just now, what if you could get notifications from Outlook and just never even use Outlook, just have everything inside Teams. Like here's an email, here's an upcoming meeting that I have to be in. I have to be in Teams anyways. So just get rid of Outlook and just have Teams.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it could work. Try and build it. Let us know.
I think so when we talk about these questions, we've gotten a few now of I want to know something that's happening with the content that's being created for what I'll call organizational data. We have business data, which is I have an order, it has to ship on this date, blah, 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 right? Then you have organizational data, which is my files, my meetings, etc. So when we talk about organizational data, you can use something called Microsoft Graph kind of in tandem with this, pull out all that information from your tenant. So if I wanted to know those sorts of things, I totally could. I can use Microsoft Graph, which is just an API, to get that information. And then I can service it how I want. And so I think a common pattern, which we won't show today, but you see a lot of developers doing, is combining Microsoft Graph with Teams apps, just because it makes sense. Teams apps are really the client experience, but then you also want to have this experience where you're pulling in data from your org. And that's really what Microsoft Graph is all about. So you see a lot of these Graph where you get your organizational data, Azure where you get your business data, and then Teams JS where you're actually exposing all this, right? That's a very common pattern inside of Teams development. So you don't just have to use what we're showing. You can combine it with things like Microsoft Graph to get that intelligence.
Awesome.
Great point. All right, so I'm going to just scaffold out the HTTP trigger with the ASP.NET Web API project. And we're going to just to look at what the template gives you by default. And like I mentioned before, it really just gives you a way to kind of jumpstart this outcome. So a lot of the boilerplate will be done for you, and we'll be pretty close to being able to just F5 right away. But there's a couple steps the Teams Toolkit will need you to do first, and I'll show you what that looks like here. The VS launched on my other screen, so let me.
So like a classic that I already mentioned on the show for our team with HTTP trigger is like our survey integration. So when someone completes a survey for our team on SurveyMonkey, first of all, like as a PM, like again, the proactive thing, you have to go visit this thing. You have to actually triage it. Like that's something that has to happen. So when a new reply happens, we could obviously do the same scenario on a timer basis and just pull SurveyMonkey for data every day or something. We basically post an incoming webhook to this notification bot. And that contains a payload from SurveyMonkey, and then we use that to actually show something in Teams. So you see a lot of webhook scenarios with these HTTP triggers where something happens, and then I want to show data in Teams as a result.
Okay, now I gotta ask a question here, because what good of a host would I be if I'm not asking these kind of like pressing questions?
Sure.
Why Newtonsoft.json when system.text.json is available? Our .NET friends here are gonna want to know.
I have no good
John,
answer.
John and I used to be on the .NET team, and clearly our .NET practices are a little getting a little stale. We need to update for best practices. So what should we be using these days?
Go ahead, Myra.
No, system text JSON.
Okay.
It's part of the .NET libraries now, so it comes with .NET. So it's our
Great. Even easier for us to make it simpler.
yeah. There are great docs about migrating from one to another too. So
nice. Yeah, it's good feedback.
the
And the cool thing.
yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to mention feedback like this is good too, because we have the GitHub repo, which I was going to mention a little bit later, but this is a good point. If we ever have any type of feedback like this, most of this project, so the Visual Studio extension is not open source yet, but the rest of the project is. So the SDK that I'll talk about, the VS Code extension, everything else is on GitHub under the Office Dev organization, and it's called Teams FX. So it's Teams framework, but the repo, and I have a link at the end. This would be good feedback because we take all the feedback like this, and when we can update the templates. And I think the VS template, if it's not already, it will be open source soon, because we've been talking about that, because there's not much of a reason for us to keep that closed at the moment. So, and even if it's not available right now, submit the feedback and we can update it. So it's not a problem.
Yeah,
Anyway.
no. And what I was gonna ask, because Pierce was mentioning all these apps that your team is building, is like, oh, SurveyMonkey, I could use that as for my job too. So are they published, or they are like private apps that you're pushing to a specific channel or a specific chat and stuff like that?
So I think one of either the Twitter or survey ones is open source, but that's good feedback, Myra. I should just open source those, because there's nothing like in the actual bot code itself. There's nothing private, right? Like it's all the data that's coming in from SurveyMonkey that's actually private. So I should totally open source those. So we will make that happen after this call. Good feedback.
Awesome.
Our viewers appreciate that. And for example, like these templates here, is that something that I could contribute to like say, here's some styles that are probably a bit more .NET 6-ish? Because I'm assuming this is a .NET 6 project.
Let me go see if I don't remember if these templates are open source yet or not. Let me just look. I don't remember.
That's certainly our intention, though, even if it's not something that you can do directly yourself today. And like John was saying, on these bot templates, the interesting thing is architecturally, there's not a huge difference between the command bot and the notification bot. They're both using bot framework, bot service behind the scenes. However, we were like, hey, you're having to write all of this boilerplate code to do these very simple things of like sending a notification or doing commanding or whatever. Because bot framework is great, but it was really made for kind of general purpose bots. It existed before Teams was a thing, right? And so with all of that power, because it can do so many different things, right? It's not really optimized for these scenarios. So that's essentially what these templates are like scenario templates almost. They're not like these are all things that you could take and just modify yourself if you wanted. There's nothing inherent about the template itself that makes it like a notification bot. It's just a template over bot framework that we've made specifically for Teams. Go ahead, John.
Awesome.
Oh, David, did you have something you wanted to say there?
No, this is great.
Cool.
So I did find it. Apparently we did publish these, so they are open source. So yes, David, feel free. Let us know all the things that we can do better. Submit feedback. And I saw some comments come in. More templates are good. Yeah, we'd love to hear that. We're constantly evaluating like what makes sense to surface as a template. Let us know if you don't have time to do it yourself. At least file an issue and let us know what it is you're looking for, what's useful for your business. It's good feedback for us. Maybe it'll be a good touch point for us to connect with you and talk more about it too. So we can learn, what type of apps you want to develop. That's something we're always doing.
Well, I think this is a great, this is the first time I've seen this, right? So my first impression, I'm totally blown away. You've covered a ton of different scenarios. You've got, hooks on where you want to host it with ASP.NET Core web APIs versus Azure functions, serverless, and you have a lot of, ground covered already. So I'm curious, this is .NET and that's where we like to focus our attention, but what other offerings are there? Like, could someone develop like a JavaScript app somehow, or is that something that's not possible right now?
Yeah. So if you want to do anything with JavaScript or TypeScript, I would recommend checking out the Teams Toolkit Visual Studio Code extension. So that's available on the marketplace. So you can just search Teams Toolkit in VS Code in the extensions menu, and you'll see our extension there. And that gives you a bunch of templates to start with. So you'll see similar things like notification bot, command bot. You'll see a way to create tabs, message extensions. We have some additional templates in the VS Code that's a little further ahead in some of those templates. So we're doing a little bit of catch-up work on the .NET side as we kind of look at like what scenarios fit, how do we build them with .NET. So we're still doing that. So there's a few deltas there you'll see in the VS Code extension, but we have a full ecosystem of end-to-end solution there for you to create TypeScript and JavaScript apps.
And then a follow-up question. So thinking as a thorough developer might imagine, when we're building apps for Teams, do they end up living anywhere that Teams is available? Like, for example, like on a mobile device, or are there limitations we should be aware of, or certain boundaries that are not yet fully fleshed out?
Yeah, so that's the goal. Right now, you can make an app and it can be available pretty much everywhere that Teams runs. I don't remember exactly the differences on mobile, but there are some differences with mobile. But we're removing those boundaries, every day. So we're getting to a place where when you create a Teams app, it's available anywhere that Teams runs. And then we're also, just talked about, we had the Ignite conference recently, and we talked about how you can build Teams apps and they can extend to even broader areas like across M365. So you can start with a Teams app, and then you can basically bring some of the capabilities are supported in Outlook and Office as well. And so you'll see things like like message extensions are a good example, or you can do something in Teams, in the compose area. That same type of information can be available in Outlook when you're creating a message. And that's all starting with like the Teams app and the same manifest definition. That's starting to be shared across M365. So yeah, we're removing a lot of those boundaries. Hopefully that answers your question.
And that's actually a really good point, David, is like when you leave the office or something and someone pings you and you need to check something and you're like, oh, I have to go to this other, it can all be in Teams, right? Like all of those apps follow you with you on whatever device you have, as long as your identity is connected to that device and you're logged into Teams, you're good, right? Which is pretty cool. And I will say, like John and I just came to Microsoft from the Xamarin acquisition. So mobile is a big passion for us. So
Perfect.
We would love for Teams to be an awesome way for you to build a mobile app. In fact, I took the Blazor Wasm just file new template, made some modifications to make it a Teams app. And the cool thing is that runs obviously in Teams, but You can even kill your internet connection, and because it's a PWA, pretty cool. You just have to select that option when you're creating that WASM project. It all works offline in Teams as well. So if you're in like a low or no connectivity environment, that works inside of Teams, which is pretty cool.
I'm a big proponent of Blazor WebAssembly. So
I was saying,
awesome.
It's like, not that I'm biased or anything, but it's one of my it's one of my favorites. So, all right, John, go ahead.
Yeah, I just was spinning up some things while we were chatting, so we didn't have to wait for it. But basically, the first steps we have to take here to get this Teams app ready is, so right now we just created a project and it's just local on our machine. The Teams platform doesn't know what we're doing, doesn't know like that we have an app. And I mentioned before, there's the idea of a manifest file, so it's basically a JSON file. So just to give you an idea, the Teams Toolkit gives you some menu options on here. So if I right click on the project, I can click on Open Manifest File. And our kind of way of managing the app template or the app manifest with Teams Toolkit is we've templatized it. I'm not sure the right word there, but we've made it into a template. So that's what this opens. And you can see there's some kind of placeholder values here for some things that might change as you create like your local version of the app. So I mentioned before, like these are basically telling Teams the endpoints of where your thing exists. And since I'm going to be, yeah, thanks for the hashtag. Since we're going to be running this locally, Teams needs to know that what's my local endpoint for this bot that's running, this app that's running. But then if I publish that later, that endpoint's going to change. So Teams Toolkit has a way to help you manage, swapping those kind of common things out. And so that's, this is what the manifest looks like. Basically, we've defined that we have a bot, define where it's available. It's personal, it's available in a team, it's available as a group chat. And that's pretty much it. The rest is all kind of just boilerplate stuff, defining like some metadata about my app, like who made it, where my icons are, things like that. And then because this is going to rely on some piece of bot framework. So right now that's kind of an implementation detail, but there's something that relies on bot framework to get this bot working, to handle the messaging. Because that is a cloud service, we do have to expose our local endpoint for debugging. So today we rely on you running ngrok or something like that, and that's how Teams Toolkit can automatically configure these endpoints for you. So you don't have to go into bot framework, paste in a bunch of URLs, your tunnel URL, and then go into Teams developer portal and update your manifest in there. Normally you have to do a lot of tedious configuration for these things. And then you have to do it every time it changes. Teams Toolkit kind of does that for you right now. And the way we expose that is basically this menu option called Prepare Teams Apps Dependencies. So what I've done off screen is I've started, ngrok is what I'm using to do tunneling. So I've started ngrok, and when I hit Prepare Teams Apps Dependencies, it's going to go to these remote services, configure all my endpoints and my manifest and everything for me. So that way I don't have to go to any portals and do any configuration. So once I've done that, so I've started my tunnel and I've hit that command in the Teams Toolkit. Now I can basically start debugging or press F5 like I mentioned earlier, and then just build my web API project and host it locally. And then it will also launch Teams in a browser. One step you didn't, maybe you caught while we were talking, is when you hit that menu command, it brings up a dialog for you to select an account. So basically that's your Microsoft 365 account for where you, like which Teams organization do you want to show this in. You need permission in order to load an app on Teams. And sometimes IT admins will disable that for security reasons, or maybe they want to review everything that's installed. So you may not have permission. It's called side loading. You may not have permission for that, but that dialog will check. When you type in an account, it'll check and see if you have side loading permissions enabled. And if you don't, it'll say, hey, you don't have permissions for this, and it'll recommend that you go create a Microsoft 365 developer program account. So that's a free service for you to create a new account where you can get your own sandboxed tenant of Teams, among other things. It offers a lot, but for these purposes, you basically get a free tenant for Teams. And then, so that's the account I picked. I picked my M365 developer account. So that gives me my own place. I'm not interrupted. Like I'm not going to launch this inside of the Microsoft Teams client right now. I can embed my own sandbox tenant, and then I'm not affecting anybody's work or anything like that. So that's what's loading here. So it's going to launch Teams.
And John, is that developer program free tenant thing? Is that totally free, or do I have to pay for that?
It's totally free.
We like free. Free is good.
Yep, it's totally free. So this is what it looks like. So basically, we just had a kind of a special link that VS will launch. So it's in the launch settings JSON file. So if you're familiar with that, just like any other .NET project, so I think it's in here. You can see there's a special link here that Teams Toolkit automatically configures for you. With some hints of your account and tenant information, so it knows where to launch. So that's what we've done here. You basically get this screen, which is just standard. I want to install an app in Teams. This is what you'll see, whether you're using Teams Toolkit or not. It's just anytime you try to add an app to Teams, this is what comes up. So you can choose like where you would want to add it. If you just click add, it's going to add it as a personal app, and that's what I'm going to do because it's the simplest for doing debugging. So all this information you see here on that screen, that's all defined in the manifest. So that's all kind of just placeholder stuff you can tweak later. And then here's my bot app. So on the left-hand side, you can see my bot is selected. It's running as a pinned, or it's running as a personal app on the side. So it doesn't do anything right now. This is a notification bot. So this is really meant to receive notifications. Apparently I have an error in my code, so we'll go back and check that. But well, at least we know something's happening. So let me go back to VS, and something that the template includes is really handy. I can just copy this. I'm just going to basically trigger that notification, with an HTTP command. So I'm just going to go over to command prompt here off screen, and I'll just run that. And hopefully that works, because for some reason that threw me an error earlier, but that's what happens when you do things live.
It's unscripted, lots of fun.
Yeah, let me just run it again.
So while you're doing that, I wanted to share that my experience was really, really enjoyable. Like I said, I created the joke bot, and I would just type in joke, and that was the command I would queue off, and then it would like regurgitate a joke, just a random joke, like nerdy joke. And I noticed that it brings up the web browser, like you said, but when I had added it, now it's actually in my formal Teams client. So it's like, oh, it's real, right? Like it's all connected. It's not just like this little, example demo thing. It's there, and I could hypothetically use it again if I wanted to, as long as it was running, right?
Yeah. When you click add, so that manifest is basically lives on in Teams now. So you can go and you can find it in your app drawer for yourself, and you can go start it again if you want. Of course, you'd have to be running locally or for it to work. But if you go and host it, then you're good to go.
That's and so in cool. This case, this template, what does the app do in this case?
Yeah, so the things we give you by default are basically, we set up some of the middleware using our SDK and configure, let's see, what's most interesting. Basically some boilerplate stuff for configuring the bot framework piece. So this relies on the bot framework SDK, which is what you see here. So that's the way to communicate back and forth. What else does it do? It gives you a default handler for this notification. So it exposes an API for you to communicate back and forth. And the default kind of UI, and for some reason it isn't working right now, so I wanted to show you. Maybe I can show you one that I ran earlier. But they basically have one method here, and it will convert this kind of information, like this notification, into an adaptive card. So we use the adaptive card SDK to build this UI. And if you're not familiar with that, an adaptive card is expressed with this JSON. So this is a way for you to define like what your message looks like. So even though I had, let's see, let me bring up my other bot that I was running earlier, just so we can see what it looks like. So I had.
So one of my favorite things about like cards as UI, which is like what this thing is that John's showing, is you basically just say like what the layout should be, and of course you have some configuration for the view and stuff. But the cool thing is the host, so wherever your bot is running, is responsible for the rendering. And so the cool thing about that is if you're on desktop, obviously your card will show, it will work because it's a huge screen. But if you're on mobile, we were talking about mobile earlier, if you're running that on mobile and you check it, everything should be all Gucci in terms of the layout and everything like that, because that's what adaptive cards handle for you. And that's why I really love using adaptive cards, because I just don't have to think about it. I'm just like, boom, here's my data, show some stuff. And then you're like, it just works. Like, I don't have to think about it, which is really nice. Like, I love using, like, I've referenced my Blazor Wasm project earlier, which is fun and awesome and amazing. And I love Blazor. But I'm responsible for making sure when that renders on mobile, it looks good on mobile, right? And the cool thing about cards is like that all just works, right? So it's kind of like a cool piece of UI tech in that I don't have to think too much about things. I just give it the data I want to show, bind it up, and then I'm good to go.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm going through two-factor auth chaos at the moment. Trying to log into my
Hashtag
Teams
security.
Yeah.
Maybe you could walk through kind of discussing what like the notification controller does here, like kind of line by line. So let's actually Cam was asking that. Like he says, walk through one of the controllers. Like, I mean, there's code here, but what's it doing?
Yeah. So basically what we're doing here is we're just reading this JSON file. So we're just saying, what is our adaptive card? What is the template for it? You can see there's some placeholder here for like what our text is going to be, what type of control do we want to show, what size is it, just some like building out the UI using kind of the language of adaptive cards. And so we have a couple placeholders. We have a title, we have the name of the app, we have a description, and we have a URL we want to show as a button, which is what this type is. And then when we click it, we're going to open up the browser and show that URL. So this is how we kind of express like what UI do we want to show. This is kind of the shape of our notification, and you can go and customize this to be whatever you want. So for example, like I mentioned earlier, our team has one for Azure DevOps, and that is how we built a custom adaptive card that shows a list of URLs and work item IDs, and then if you click them, it opens up that specific thing, or you has a button for the query. It shows who's assigned to it, all that kind of stuff. So that's all like templated things that we built out a UI for. So go back in the controller here, and then what we're doing is we're using the SDK here to say where is this app installed. So that's basically get everywhere this app is installed, because multiple people could have the same app installed. Right now it's just me, so there's one installation, but multiple people could be running this app. And then for each of those installations, we're basically going to build out an object for the adaptive card, a way to use that template and bind the data in it, and that uses the adaptive card SDK to do it. So that's kind of what this code in the middle here is doing. And here's where we fill in those placeholder values. So the name of these properties nicely binds to these placeholders inside of the adaptive card template. So we have our title, our app name, some description, and we just show some dynamic data here based on what type of installation is. So the installation type is it a personal, or is it a group, or is it a chat? So that's kind of the things I showed a little bit earlier. And I'll show you what that looks like. So I'll show you this other app I had. I'd done this a little bit earlier today. Here's what that looks like inside of Teams. So here's what it looks like first. Here's the title. Here's the app name. Here's the description. The installation type is it's a personal app, so it's installed to a person. And here's that action type, open URL. So here's the button, and I click it and it opens up that URL. So that's that's an adaptive card.
That's actually really cool. And I know that Pierce had shared the designer. I posted that here so people see that as well. Today I learned about adaptive cards, and now I want to go play with those and design some. That's really neat. I love that. We do have another question here. They're asking, can Teams apps access computer settings like IP of the NIC, computer name, other things like that?
I don't actually know.
Generally, I don't think so. So you can use device functionality, such as like if I'm on Teams desktop, I want to access, device sensors mostly, such as like a microphone or a camera or things like that. Excuse me. Those are totally accessible, but generally the Teams client and Teams SDK like doesn't wander into that territory. It's just about what we showed so far. So generally not, unless there's something I'm unaware of. It's mostly contained to device sensors, and those are accessible via like standard web APIs. But you can also Teams.js has like an open camera API, and you get the nice Teams Chrome and like UX when you use those APIs, versus like if you're just using the web APIs, you just get like the web API experience. So that's the main thing I'm aware of in terms of using things from your actual device and surfacing them in Teams.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's not something we talked about yet, but the way to interact with the Teams client itself, there's a JavaScript library for that. That's what Pierce keeps referring to as Teams.js. So that's available on NPM. Earlier, I showed the different templates we offer. We have the tab template, which is a way to basically show some web content inside of a tab. That uses Blazor, but we've provided a small wrapper around Teams.js to give you some C# ways to interact with that JavaScript library to kind of live more true to the Blazor, intention of that. So we have some abstractions there and some ways in using the Blazor interop classes. So nothing too magical there. That's also open source. And some of the pieces are included inside the template to make it easier to customize. But that's the way you interact with the Teams.js library. So if you're interested in like what you can get, I would say go take a look at the Teams.js library, whatever APIs it surfaces. Those are the types of information you get. So you can see things like Pierce had mentioned, how to interact with whatever Teams client can give you. That's what you'll get.
And I think it's a great way for folks also, like as it's open source, for people to see how to do the interop with Blazor. Well, or David's book.
There you go. Exactly.
Shameless plug.
Yeah, you should go in there and check it out, David, and give us some tips. Let us know how we can improve the template.
Absolutely.
The only other thing I didn't mention was just the last thing we do in the sample code here is just send the adaptive card. So there's basically the Teams FX SDK. So this is the SDK here. We have it. It's on NuGet. You can see it's included here. This is what gives you some of these abstractions, like the Teams bot installation type, this helper method to send an adaptive card. These are just higher level methods to reduce the amount of code you have to write to do these actions. Normally, you'd have to do a lot of bot framework code specific to that SDK. Then you'd have to combine that with different things for Teams. So the Teams FX provides a little bit of middleware there for you to be able to get to these solutions a little faster. So that's what we provide in the template by default. So really, this just gives you a way to customize business logic. You could go from here and do whatever you want in this inside this method, however you want to structure that, and then send the adaptive card, and then you have whatever you need. So you can spend time just working on your actual business problem and not connecting all the pieces of a Teams app and bot framework and adaptive cards. You don't have to go spend too much time connecting all that. Kind of do it all in one step.
And in this template, are you just waiting to see an event, like any kind of chat that pops in the chat, and then it reacts to it? So it's like reading that event and then posting the card.
Yeah, I mean, it's just exposing this endpoint. So if you post to this, whatever kind of payload you want to do, right now it's just kind of very naive about what's coming in. So you can do whatever you want right now. But that's all that this is doing.
Okay.
So Myra, we have the way we think about bots is there's like bots that are like these where something happens and I want to post content into Teams, or the command bot where I want to trigger a command and post some content in. And then there are what I'll call conversational chat bots, which is like I want to have a conversation with a bot and I want the bot to do something based off something I'm saying, right? And you can kind of do this with command bots. Like I could trigger a command and give it some parameters and input. But if you truly just want it to be like sitting in that channel listening and doing things, that's just like a regular bot. You wouldn't have to use one of these bot templates that we're showing here today. That's more of the conversational bot scenario. And the reason we didn't focus on that with Teams Toolkit is the more customers we talk to, the more we found that they mostly just wanted these scenarios, like posting a notification into Teams or triggering things with a command. Less so the kind of true conversational scenarios. You see those a lot with bots outside of Teams. Like, I was trying to contact Delta support the other day, and they threw me in the chatbot flow and iMessage. And it's like that sort of thing is really popular outside of Teams, less so inside of Teams from the customer conversations we've seen, but totally possible from a technical perspective to do.
Yep. Yeah.
And there's another question about, does the toolkit have any Lewis integration?
No, we don't have any Lewis integration. We, like Pierce has mentioned, we've been focusing on, I think, slightly different scenarios for using bots. Mostly, we've been looking at bots as mostly as an endpoint. The conversational and like natural language stuff of those type of bots, that's not something we've templatized. Is that the word we came up with? That's not something we've made a template yet.
Yeah.
So, but I think on your earlier point, there's something else this template does do, and both the templates do, the command and bot. Something in here by default is if you just send a message to this notification bot, it's processed by this API, and right now it doesn't do much. This is just some boilerplate bot framework code. But if you look at the command bot template, you'll see how it takes this, basically this hook of saying like, here's the incoming message. Let me process it and see, is it a recognized command? Does it match the patterns that I'm looking for? Is it like, hello or create ticket or something like that? And then do some custom logic and then do something else, like respond back. The command bot template goes through that flow more. In this template, we just kind of put this here to show you like what, if you just type in messages, it'll just do nothing right now. It won't respond because this process doesn't do anything. But it's like Pierce said, it's fully possible from a technical perspective. It's just not something we've provided as default.
Awesome. So we are right on time. I want to thank you both for coming here. The hour flew by, and I think we just scratched the surface of what you can do with the Teams Toolkit. But I want to thank everyone for watching. You can find other streams at dot.net/live. And we don't have a guest yet for next week, so we'll invite you all to go to that aka.ms/onnetlive-guest to submit your show. Be a guest on our show. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and thank you, Pierce and John, for sharing this.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks.